Welcome back to My Trauma's Chronic, but I'm Iconic. Today we embark on a journey into the intricate landscape of mental health care, guided by the wisdom and expertise of our esteemed guest, Rowan Foster. In a world where the nuances of mental health can often be overlooked, Rowan's voice stands as a beacon of insight and advocacy. As an expert by experience worker for the NHS, she brings a wealth of versatile knowledge to the table, spanning the realms of complex trauma, inpatient care, and the intersectionality of autism and disability with mental health. Join us as we peel back the layers of stigma and misconception, diving deep into the heart of compassionate care and inclusive practices. Through Rowan's lived experience and dedication to positive change, we'll uncover the transformative power of empathy, understanding, and solidarity in the realm of mental health. So prepare to be inspired, challenged, and empowered as we embark on this transformative journey together. Make sure you get yourself a cup of tea, get cozy, and before we continue, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as it allows us to continue to do the work that we're doing and make an impact on the world. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would you pick?
Oh, there's so many words out there that it's so difficult to know which one to pick. And that's always the question that you get asked in like an interview, isn't it? And I think I remember being asked this exact question in an interview, but I've got no idea what answers I used. I think I'd describe myself as quite assertive, and quite, or maybe quite fiery. I think a lot of those words cross over a lot.
Mm.
I know that I have a lot to say, and I guess I'm quite bubbly is maybe another word that I'd use. And I guess another word would be kind. I try to be a kind person. I think that's something that is really integral to who I am as a human being. I think kindness and caring about other people is something that drives a lot of the way that I work and the way that I move through the world. So have I given you like 5 words?
It's
I've
okay.
given you three, but two that are interchangeable. I can't decide between assertive and fiery. I think it depends on the situation. If
Mm,
someone's not annoyed me, then I'm assertive. If they have annoyed me, then I'm fiery. Depends
yeah.
on the day.
I feel like, especially like you have autism
Yeah,
and I have autism too. I feel like we're really, really passionate about
yeah,
our thing. And when people like don't get how you're
mm,
passionate and you're like, well, this, especially when something happens, like
yeah,
that fiery side will come out. And I'm just like, this is who
definitely.
I am. And I like it. If you don't, you can fuck
Exactly.
off. Like,
I agree. I'm in alignment with that. I think it's also that I end up being very direct. If I want to say something, I say exactly what I mean. I don't tend to mince words or put it in a more gentle. The thing is that when I do put it in a gentle way, people tell me that I'm still being direct, and I'm like, this was the nice version. I'm trying to be nice to you. So I completely hear you. It's difficult, isn't it?
yeah,
I love being
definitely.
autistic, but sometimes it does mean that I'm a bit more direct than perhaps the situation necessitates.
Yeah, and that's like really, really frustrating because a lot of people, even if they are aware that you have autism,
Hmm.
they don't put in like the considerations. Like, I might be a bit more direct. I might be a bit more sensitive to loud noises.
Mm.
I might hate bright lights and wear sunglasses in meetings, but it
Yeah.
doesn't make me less that, you know?
I think that people tend to, we've got a bit better. When I was diagnosed, which was back in 2015, I think, 2014 or 2015. I don't have the medical records because care experience, we don't know where we come from,
Hey.
I don't have none of my records. But it was around then. But autism was not understood in the way that it is now, especially in girls. It's still very much kind of 5-year-old boy who likes trains, especially white 5-year-old boy who likes trains, and the level of kind of cultural competency within autism diagnosis, which is non-existent, and it's awful. Plus, actually understanding of how it can present in different genders, how it can present in people who are care experienced. We're further along, but we're not exactly where we need to be, and that's still impacting so many autistic girls. And it's one of the reasons that I end up working with so many autistic girls in the work that I do, simply because we're those of us traumatized. And if we weren't traumatized before, we definitely are now, because existing as an autistic person moving through the world in itself can be experienced as traumatic, and it can be traumatic. The line between that and complex trauma, it gets a bit messy, and I'm happy to go into more about that later because me and complex trauma are best mates. um,
Yeah.
love it. It's great fun. But I think it's really interesting how autism understanding has transformed. When I would say that I was autistic when I was younger, people would go, but you don't look autistic.
Oh my God.
And all of those sorts of things. And although that does still happen, people have started to understand a bit more about what that means. They'll go, oh, but you're so, you might have had this, oh, but you're so articulate.
Oh my God, I hate that one.
And I'm
Like,
like, uh-huh.
you should see me when I'm distressed. I'm not as articulate.
I
I can be
know.
articulate where I'm so direct. I'm verbally abusing you, or I can be non-verbal. So,
Yeah, honestly, it's people are starting to understand, and even now, like in discussions at work and in discussions around my sister's inquest, this came up so much. People like have started to understand, but there's still that kind of aspect where they see it as something to change or something to cure, and everyone's entitled to feel however they want to feel around being autistic or having an autism diagnosis, and to use whatever language feels comfortable to them. I'd never sit here and try and direct what that means for someone for themselves. But when a professional, somebody who's taking care of you, sees something that you is quite integral to who you are as a person. There are parts of being autistic that I wish I could, the bright lights, not always useful. Before, I'm hard of hearing now, so I used to be much more sensitive to loud noises, but that one kind of solved itself. I'm like, thank you, hearing loss. That's actually really helped me. I just the amount of times I'm in a situation and I'll just go, hearing aids out, don't listen to this. I can't. But I used to not be able to have an ambulance siren go past, and I would have to stop and I'd have to put my hands over my ears. And that's got better now because I've lost my hearing a bit. But those are parts that, are frustrating, and that, if being autistic is a mixed bag. There are times where you just go, God, I just wish that I could move through the world and I could understand what people want from me, and I could understand how to navigate this world. And it feels like everyone speaks a language that I don't. But there's also so much of it that's beautiful, that's integral to who you are as a person. And if I was to change that or remove that, then I wouldn't be myself. And I think that's an approach and an understanding that is a bit too radical for some places. And simultaneously, the understanding that we can help between my experience of autism and the experience of somebody with significantly higher support needs who may need a lot of care, and support, and the experiences of their families where they might see autism as something that they want to cure because they see it as a limitation and disability to their child. And that's not my place to say that they're not allowed to feel that way. I think it's easy from a more privileged perspective, somebody with lower support needs, to sit here and go, oh, well, I love being autistic, but not everyone's going to feel that way about it. And that's something that, we always have to balance, isn't it? So
yeah, definitely. I feel like autism is a limitation, but also it's this wonderful thing at the same time.
yeah.
It's quite dialectical. And I'm like,
Mm.
I really like, I feel like, sometimes the cons outweigh the pros outweigh the cons. But, at the end of the day, it's who I am. I'm
Definitely.
sure you will feel that way as well. It's who
Yeah.
you are, and you wouldn't change anything in the world for it.
No,
The same
exactly.
thing. Maybe less noise, but
Yeah. It's like you have those moments where you're like, God, I really fucking hate being autistic.
yeah,
You always have those moments where you're like, and like especially like social stuff where it's like, this is the bane of my existence. Why did I have to be born this way? But most of the time you're at a kind of place of acceptance, of happiness with it. It's just that sometimes, like me and ambulance sirens, that's me. That's the one time I'm like, nah, I would like to opt out of being autistic for like about 5 minutes, please.
oh my
But
God.
she just
It,
sort of wish could turn it off.
the worst part is I feel like activities, they
Mm,
think like even if they have their sensory times or whatever, like
yeah.
if you go trampolining at like flip out or something, it's
Yeah.
still bright, it's still loud, it's still,
Yeah.
and the thing is that people expect people with support needs to look a certain way,
Yeah.
or people with autism to automatically have high support needs
Yeah.
or lower support needs. And I'm like for example, nobody would like by looking at me
Mm.
would know that I have three people follow me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you know, it's like, and I feel like often there's a thing with fluctuating needs with,
Definitely.
and that, that can be used against you, especially, being in care and like,
Yeah.
um,
And it's
you
like, oh,
know,
well, it's convenient that you're acting out now, rather than be like, no, actually, I'm just stressed by this situation. And I've recovered, a significant amount of my independence, but I still live in supported housing. And for my physical, it's more for my physical health needs, but I have carers who come and help sort out my house because I can't do it myself. And that doesn't mean that my life is less worthy or that I would change my existence for something else, but it's very, yeah, I know exactly what you mean when someone looks at you and they assume what your support needs might be from how verbal you are. And there's a level, I get it to some degree. I can understand that my existence moving through the world as somebody who's able to verbalize my needs, that does bring me privilege. But that doesn't mean that I don't have any support needs at all. And that, yeah, again, it's really complicated. I think one of the things that also comes in, and I'm sure you might resonate with this, is when you have other conditions as well, like complex trauma. For me, I have physical health stuff. It's kind of like it all kind of adds up. And even though my support needs might not be as high if I was just autistic and I didn't have everything else, it gets written like most support needs overall as a human being are higher because of all those other things going on. So it
yeah,
can often be a really simplistic discussion where it's like, well, what are your autism support needs? And it's like, it's actually quite hard to differentiate which comes from where and why this behavior is happening and why you're feeling this way. Um, you know, you like to think that you can box in every experience as to, well, this is my autism, this is my complex trauma, this is my this is my son loss, this is that, but all of those parts of you are connected. It's all,
yeah,
I think what I always say is it's all happening in the same body, it's all happening in the same brain. Like you can only differentiate it so much before you start to lose the understanding. And
yeah,
you lose the nuance as well if you start to say, well, if you go, well, I'm doing this because I'm autistic, they go, well, someone else who's autistic does this differently, and it's like, but you have to consider how I experience it, how that interacts with other experiences of mine. It gets complicated. I've got a lot to say about autism, so
yeah, like definitely. And as you should, like I feel like, I am able to the way that I differentiate my autism, my complex trauma, my personality disorder, all
yeah,
of that, my ADHD, Royce me, just my name. I
yeah.
like this is just Royce me being Royce me. And and I feel like it's autism, it comes with so many disadvantages of, how society perceives us.
Mm.
And it's like, and people like forget, like, we can, like, to the economy or to the at a workplace or at like a family home or whatever, can bring 10 times more than a neurotypical person.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's not, we don't lose our value just because we have, and that's the case across the board. If you have any sort of mental health condition, if you have any sort of disability of any kind, that doesn't take away from your value as a human being and the fact that actually you bring joy to spaces. I mean, in fairness, you can be an autistic person and still be a complete asshole. That doesn't, you don't opt out just because you have diagnosis of anything, but there's a reason that autistic people have friends, and that's one of the things, oh, you can't be autistic because you have friends. It's like maybe people just like being around me. Like, I know that's shocking, but you don't like that. But if you are lucky enough to have people around you who love you and who care about you, and you can find your chosen family or your chosen social circles, and those, you're loved by those spaces just as much for being autistic. And often, I mean, one of the things that I always find, and you might find it as well, is that we do tend to find people like us. So almost all of my friends are autistic, and most of them also have complex trauma. There's something in that kind of like, you meet somebody new and you're like, we get on really well. Have you met ancestral? And every time, literally, I was having a conversation on the train the other day. I was in a really social mood. I think three people spoke to me that day. I don't know what it was, to be honest. Maybe I think I was wearing quite a low cut top, so maybe that was just getting all the attention that I needed that day for whatever reason. But I got on this train. I started speaking to this girl next to me, and about 5 minutes in, we were like, let's break the conversation. And then we mentioned neurodivergent, we kind of mentioned neurodivergence, and it's like are you? Are you? And then we kind of, and she was autistic. And the one person who had actually like wanted to speak to, there's a couple of other people who tried to speak to me, but I was like, socializing, please don't speak to me. But this one person, I was like, oh, we get on really well. The conversation just flowed really naturally. And she's autistic. And it's what's described as, and I'm not sure if you've heard of the double empathy problem, but it's this kind of understanding that for autistic people, instead of it's not that we can't follow any social rules, that we don't know how to socialize. We just follow a different set of kind of social rules. There's different and a different when we socialize in a different way, and that most of the time, if you put us in front of another autistic person, we will share that kind of communication style. We'll be able to understand and get each other a lot more, to the point where subconsciously you end up seeking out loads of autistic people for your friendship circles, even if that's completely unintentional. And the amount of times I've made friends and when we started the friendship, they were like, no, I'm not autistic. It's been about 3 years later, and they were like, so I'm looking at a diagnosis. And I was like, I knew it, it's gonna happen. Um, but it's, I think there's so much joy to being autistic. There's so much joy to moving through the world as a different person, actually, although it's something that brings a lot of stigma and a lot of difficulty. I wouldn't, it's just kind of like you said earlier, I wouldn't change who I am for the world.
Yeah,
I'm loved for who I am. I love myself for who I am. And I think that's all that really matters, isn't it? I love
yeah.
myself. So it's great.
Love, it goes a long way.
Mm,
And, like I know we're going to talk about inpatient a bit
mm,
later in
sure.
much more depth. But, when you're a psychiatric ward,
Mm.
everybody there has both autism and ADHD. And if they don't,
Yeah.
they're strange. Like, what do you mean you don't have autism or ADHD or both?
I know what you mean. Um, you, it's quite difficult because it also depends what kind of ward you're on.
Mm,
There's a couple of different types, especially, and I work primarily with children, but it is something that I always go into. Like, I think there was a ward that I went into recently, and I was speaking to one of my colleagues, and I was like, and then we had like what, like 5 or 6 people there, and I said, "Are any of them autistic?" And they said no, and I ran. That might change. I'm not sure if that's correct. I went in and there was like one person I was like there, and I asked my colleague later, I was like, are you sure they're not autistic? Because and they were like, no, I did, I did ask, and they've said that they said that, they're probably not, that it doesn't run their family or whatever. But like, there was a couple of people, I was like, and like like you just knew. And I was, and it's not like it's like I have like different levels to it. Sometimes I meet someone like they're definitely autistic, and then sometimes I meet someone I'm like,
mm, yeah.
like I'm not gonna diagnose you from like
Mm.
my armchair, but I am gonna look at you and think,
Did
are you sure?
we? Are we twins? Like,
Yeah, are we twins? And it is like the rates are significantly higher within inpatient care. And there's a reason why there's specific pathways because of that for autistic people. There's something called CETRs and
yeah.
CTRs,
I've
which
had
you might,
it too.
yeah, funsies. A friend of mine, we drafted a lot of the policy, and I was on the expert reference group for the new redraft of the policy. So I was like, oh, I actually know about CTRs. Feel very fancy. But there's a lot but there's a reason for that, obviously. As you might be aware, the origins of CTR are the recommendations out of something called Winterbourne View, which is basically a hospital that was really crap and then treated lots of autistic people really crap. And we know that autistic people find themselves in hospital and in psychiatric hospitals far more, and that once they're in, it's quite difficult to get them out because, understandably, when you put an autistic person into a stressful environment, they might struggle more, especially if that space isn't sensory friendly. Their behaviors are gonna escalate, even though I don't like using that term, but I think that's certainly how it would be
Yeah.
described. Somebody will become more distressed, their baseline will become distress, and then it'll be very hard for staff to manage them. Whereas
Mm.
actually the best thing is for them to not be in a space um, where they're under that level of stress, where it's really stressful being in a psychiatric hospital. It's really
Yeah.
difficult. Um,
I
and
was
so it's
sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Lee.
Um, I was in a psychiatric ward like multiple times, and it was
Yeah.
really highly stressful. And I feel like because I was, physically, I would like, here I would get like I'll get really distressed to the point where I will get physical.
Yeah,
And
been there.
it's that's when
Yeah.
they're like, okay, we draw the line. And I'm
Yeah.
like, those people are the people that need the most help. But because I feel like, the thing is, I do not like condemn, like, the NHS staff or anybody getting abused or assaulted. But when you go to a certain job with people with certain needs,
Yeah.
you're
I
you're
had,
like,
you know what, you're sorry, because I had this discussion literally yesterday. And it's so difficult because nobody deserves to be hurt, but there is a difference between, and it's also the question that is asked sometimes is somebody being violent because of a mental health need or a neurodivergent need, or are they being violent because they want to be? Because sometimes there will be people who are nasty because they want to be, but in the context of a psychiatric ward, that's somebody who doesn't have the capacity to choose whether they're there or not. Because usually, some people are there voluntarily, but in a lot of the units that I go to, most people aren't there voluntarily. Most people are under section. And you do choose as a member of staff to go into that space. You
yeah,
are choosing, and you are also being paid to be there. That's part of the reason that you're being paid to be there. That's some of the risk that you are choosing to take on. And if it's too much for you,
not
you
the
can
place.
leave. You can go. You know who can't go? Someone who's sectioned. Um, and it is,
It's
and you hold a lot of power as a member of staff within that situation as to how you handle that situation. Sometimes it's not avoidable, and sometimes somebody is going to become violent, and going to get physical, and that's something that you can't avoid. But often you can avoid that. My boss is a mental health nurse, and she said, actually, your greatest tool as a mental health nurse is your words. Actually, you don't need to be a massive, people think that, for example, in really high security mental health hospitals like Broadmoor, they all need to be big, they all need to be big, bulky men, so that if they get attacked by the thing, and this is genuinely like a perception that kind of mental health nurses have, or apparently, or that people seem to have. I don't know much about it because I haven't gone there, but that's what I hear. And that apparently, actually, that's not, it doesn't matter, because if you're good at your job, you don't need to be big and bulky. You don't need everyone to come, you won't need to restrain most of the time. Sometimes you will, sometimes those things will happen, but most of the time, if you're good enough at de-escalation,
yeah,
then somebody won't get physical. And there is a responsibility there as a mental health nurse or any sort of mental health professional. And I'm not a nurse, I'm a lived experience professional, but I'm still aware when I'm going in to see somebody, I'm under that risk.
yeah,
I have to take an alarm in with me. Haven't been attacked yet. Don't think, and you know what? I don't think I will be, because I don't think if somebody was that unwell, I probably wouldn't be in a position where I was speaking to them anyway. Simply because it wouldn't be judged appropriate for me to go and visit, because they'd be so distressed they probably wouldn't be able to have a proper conversation with me. But generally, I don't go into wards and piss people off.
yeah.
You
I
know?
feel like there's a lot of like when there's a lot of when it gets to a point where people are working these shifts and they come to a point where they have compassion fatigue, or they just don't want to be there,
Massively.
or
And
they
it's
just don't want to be there. Like, people say, "Oh, the pay's not good for a nurse." Da, da, da. It's not good for somebody who works at the NHS,
no.
but let's be realistic. It's more than the minimum wage,
Yeah, it
and
depends what your job is, to be fair. That's correct for a nurse, but for an HCA, they're not getting paid more than the minimum wage.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like, and I'm like, when people are so negative and you don't want to be there, the young
Yeah.
people know.
Oh yeah, everyone knows.
Everybody knows. And the thing is, and then go
And there's
you
people
wonder,
who like, yeah, and there's people who like care and who get it, and people who don't when you go into when you go into any sort of mental health setting, and you can just tell, you can smell it like a mile away.
yeah,
You just know, because it's how they treat you. It's how, it's if they roll their eyes at you when you say that you're upset, or how they respond when you express distress. It's just so, it almost comes out of their pores. You can see it,
yeah.
and
It's
and
like a
it's one of the
distinctive
things.
smell
Oh,
is
100%.
distinct.
I have a policy with myself that, like, if I'm going into a ward, I need to be excited to go and see young people. I need to want to see them. If I don't want to, I don't go. Seriously, I won't go, because, and I know that I'm in a place of privilege to be able to do that, but I would say, actually, I can't do my job. If I'm having a really crap day and I can't actually go and I can engage with these young people in a place where I feel, where I'm actually able to listen to them and I care and I want to hear what they have to say, then I shouldn't be going in. Then I shouldn't be doing, then I should not be in hospital today. I should not be going and spending time with them. And I also, for me, I work remotely a lot of the time, so that's a choice that I have. But I have never really struggled to do that.
Mm.
To be honest, I always want to see the young people that I go and see. I genuinely care about what they think and what happens to them. And I think that there's also, again, because I don't hold any power over them, my job is to listen to them and to understand who they are and understand what they're experiencing. And then take that forward and then go, okay, let's make sure that I've listened to what you said. If there anything specific, if there's specific actions I can take forward to the ward and get followed up to make sure that it happens. And also just wider things about understanding how they feel about being in hospital and what it's like as a human being to be in this
Yeah.
space.
I feel
You're
like being
not
deprived of your liberty is a big thing, which people don't
massively.
understand, and the transition to it. And
Mm,
and I feel like people with autism, they get kicked out of. I feel like there's this thing that I've noticed in the psychiatric ward
mm,
in every single stay that I had, that that if you are from a marginalized race or group,
yeah.
your care is going to look completely different. And the one example that I tell people was I used to get really, really, really upset, but I wouldn't hurt people. I would just hurt myself, but not in like a, yeah, I might head bang my head,
Yeah.
but nothing like cussing myself or anything like that. Where,
Mm,
whereas this person would hurt members of staff,
yeah.
and but I'm the one that's going to end up in seclusion, and I'm
Yeah.
like it's really,
Yeah,
and
no,
I
that makes
calm
sense.
down much quicker than this person, and I'm
Yeah.
like, it's so much of a fight, and it's even, what makes it really
Mm,
distressing is especially with your own people as well, like people with like your same ethnicity or something like that, and they, oh well, you brought yourself here, you're did it, and I'm like,
yeah.
look, and you just don't feel like you have nowhere to go, and your experience is so much worse, and and I feel like that, like in the whole of the UK, you have the CTR thing, but it's not really support, is it? They can make recommendations, they're not requirements. There's no support in the United Kingdom for autism.
No, there's nothing. I know, it's
And
awful.
yeah, and sending children and young people to psychiatric wards as a first result.
Hmm.
And
I
I'm
know.
like,
It's
what
horrific.
is this going to do? It's going to be like, okay, you do this. This is what's going to happen. And then, like 2 weeks or whatever, you say the right things, you will get out. And then you
Yeah.
do it again. You try to kill yourself, or you try to harm yourself in some sort of way, or other people, depending on,
Yeah.
or both, and you end up
And then
back in the same place. And then the thing is,
nothing
eventually,
changed.
yeah, nothing changes, and then eventually they end up in the criminal justice system, and people
Yeah.
are like, well, and the thing that people don't understand, right, with neurodivergence, they're like, it's not a choice, what way you end up in, whether you're like, for example, us, right, we are expert by experience workers. For
Mm.
like, I work for the local authorities, I work for NHS, so you work for the NHS. We are seen like doing well in life,
Yeah.
like for somebody with our conditions, with
Yeah.
our
We're
needs,
one of
our,
the good ones. Yeah.
yeah, good ones. I don't know how many
Yeah.
people agree
We've
with.
got better, apparently.
Yeah.
They don't ask me when they say that. They're like, oh, but I
Oh,
had a psychiatrist say that to me that I worked with, and I was like, and I was saying, but like I'm like I get it. Like I was one of these young people. They're like, oh, but something changed for you, and that's why. And I'm like,
nothing
no, not
did.
necessarily. Actually, there's not this magic thing that divides me from them.
The one.
I'm in the position that I'm in for a lot of different, and yeah, there's internal factors. I'm allowed to be proud of myself and how hard I've worked, but people can work just as hard as me and still end up in whatever situation. There's luck, privilege, that helps, There's lots of things, and there's lots of things that do count against me, but there's other things that make my life easier. The way that that I am able to verbalize myself, that I come from quite an affluent county. I live in Surrey, which has pretty good funding. I don't have a kind of working class accent, even though I grew up working class. It's actually quite a common thing for autistic people. We don't pick up accents. Fun fact, it is actually a thing. But things like that affect how I am perceived. And that's not me, that's not my achievement. That's not something that I've done magically well, or that I've responded to certain medication in good ways, or that they haven't, or that I haven't had an allergic reaction to this. There's lots of things that I do have that play to my advantage. And I think it's this idea, I think, that mental health is like a personal failure, or being in or that being in the criminal justice system, or any of these other things that happen to you, or being homeless, which, been there, done that, are a personal failure, rather than understanding that it's like a societal issue, and it's not about people, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, even that phrase doesn't even mean what it's meant to mean. Um, and it's something that I always find really frustrating, because it's like trying to help people understand that in a really like non-scary way, none of us are safe.
Yeah.
You know?
Like tomorrow we could both like end up
Oh
in
yeah.
like, prison. Like,
Yeah.
we got distressed on the streets one day, somebody tries to touch us, and then we be like, oh my God, I don't feel safe. I need to protect myself.
Yeah.
And then okay, you end up in like prison and you're like, I was
But here's
distressed.
the thing, because you know what? I probably wouldn't, because I'm a white woman. Genuinely, because, and
Mm,
I remember this happening with my sister. She had loads of incidents, and police were always great with her. Of course they were, because she was a small white woman who they didn't feel threatened by. That's privilege. That's privilege, and
yeah.
that's not the only reason. But actually, when I've never had bad interactions with the police, because of course I haven't, and that doesn't mean that it's as easy as that and for every single person. But it really does. It does affect things. I could end up in prison, but you know what? I'd have to do a hell of a lot more to get there than somebody from a marginalised background. And also, it's one of the areas where actually being a woman does play to your advantage, because you're not seen as a threat in the same way.
Yeah.
Um, if like when my sister had a knife during like incidents, and we have it on police, she never got attacked. They didn't panic the same way they would as if she was a 6 foot man, especially if she wasn't a white man. We see this. We know that it happens. Anyone who's read the Inquest website knows how police brutality works, and it isn't. I do know white people who have had police brutality happen to them. A close friend of mine is disabled, and after she was spiked, she went to a friend's for help, and she had a male police officer who was extremely misogynistic and horrible, and he he engaged in police brutality, um but even she understands that that's not a common experience for her, and that was because, and it's not the same. And I'm never going to sit here and say that I can understand what that's like. I can try to be an ally, I can try and fight for justice, but
Yeah.
I can't understand what it's like to be in that position. And I've been lucky enough to have things like white privilege that have helped me, that have meant that, and if you look at exit by experience spaces, they're very white. They are,
Yeah.
and that's something that a lot of these spaces are aware of. And there's so many different different factors that come into that, many of which I am nowhere near qualified, both in personal experience or in research, to talk about. But we know that, racial disparities massively exist within the NHS, and the way that people are treated is different. It's horrific.
Absolutely. And it's like like,
Mm,
and usually the one thing that like I the thing that makes me angry, like
mm,
even when I'm in distress, I'm unable to comprehend.
yeah,
But looking back every single time, from what I can remember, it's always the harshest bit, being like dragged, being treated like an animal, having armed police respond
yeah.
within seconds, literally seconds, because I got upset, and I'm like
Mm,
being threatened to like the thing is, right, if one thing is like if somebody like was cutting themselves with a knife, like on the throat, whatever, like that, and they were white,
mm.
they probably wouldn't have an armed police response. Like, and if they did,
Yeah,
they
they
wouldn't
they
expect
probably
them to
would, but
say,
they get a different response, I think, is
yeah,
my experience from,
yeah,
not either. That's not the type of instance I've used to have. My sister used to have a lot, used to have
yeah.
instances like that. And we did get blunt police responses, because that is what happens usually with a knife. But the treatment that she would have received,
And
I would say, is different.
literally, and this wasn't like, and it was like this, like there was this person that
Mm.
I knew, and it happened multiple times as well. They're like, because they were known to the police,
Yeah,
and they were known as very high risk, and
yeah,
they were, they're known to like, they have behavioral difficulties, which is again like a mental health difficulties, like a,
Mm.
and they, you know, but
I
they
hate the
can,
word behavioral, hate it.
yeah, I feel
I know
like,
what you mean, but I know
yeah,
exactly what you mean. I don't think there's a better word,
yeah,
but
and it's so different. I feel like it's so difficult. Like when people, this is another thing. I'm gonna stop what I'm saying because this is more
no,
important.
please do. Go for it.
You know what? Like this is one thing that I have to explain to people, and I always had
Mm,
to explain to people. My everything I do, if I eat the sweet that's on my table right now,
mm.
that's a behavior. If
Yeah,
I slam the door, that's behavior. If I go
yeah,
to bed and sleep, that's a behavior.
yeah.
If I sit up, that's a
Apologize.
behavior. Because I have social, emotional, mental health difficulties,
Yeah,
does not mean I have behavioral difficulties.
yeah,
Behavioral difficulties is completely different.
yeah.
Behavioral difficulties is a whole other part of mental health. And these people, it's different. And people don't realize this is another thing people don't realize. People
Mm,
with behavioral difficulties and people who just have bad behavior,
mm.
people don't realize people with behavioral difficulties can't actually control what they do.
Yeah.
It's not like they were like, oh, I'm just gonna go punch you in the face. Like,
I think one of the phrases that I've heard that I think is really true is all behavior is communication.
yes,
You
that's what
know,
I said.
all behavior is communication. And again, it's having a diagnosis doesn't exempt you from the possibility of being an asshole. You know, anyone can be an asshole. Doesn't matter how many diagnoses you have, doesn't matter how much is wrong with you. Generally, you can still be, you have the capability to be to be a bad person. But that doesn't mean that it's again, you've got to view the context of the behavior. You've got to view the context of, and again, it's what I think people need to do more, and it's what I try and really maximize within my practice is always ask why. Why has this happened? And they might not have that answer in that moment, but try and think about it. Don't immediately go, well, they've done it, and the fact and the term behavioral is thrown around so much, like, oh, this is behavior, that's behavior. I'm like, have you actually asked them though? Have you asked them why they did that? For example, if there's like, and there are like sometimes incidents that happen that are quite hard to class as anything other than bad behavior. There's no clear there's no clear mental health condition that's causing that behavior. But you have to think of, but what are the unmet needs in this situation? Where is this coming from? Or someone's done something, oh, they said that they're bored. Well, yeah, they might be bored because they're stuck in an inpatient hospital. I'd be bored. Wouldn't you be bored? You know, people people are still teenagers. People, will want to, and again, I lived in a children's home for 4 years, and the amount of kind of stuff that sometimes happened that was just like you just look at people and go, why the fuck did they do that? But there will always be a reason, there'll always be a context. That might be wanting to seem cool to their friends. That might be, wanting to assert power, wanting to feel in control of something. If you act out first, then no one's good, then you won't get in trouble for stuff that actually isn't your fault. All these other sorts of things, the amount of times where young people that I lived with, or that I've known, have gone into a new foster placement and acted up, and no one's understood why. But it's because if then they don't have to worry about rejection. That fear of somebody of being too much, that fear of being moved on just the next place, and they're like, well, it's going to happen anyway, so I might as well just make it happen on my terms. Things
Mm.
like, human beings want control. We want structure. We want security. And when we can't get that, then we act in weird ways. And for somebody who's never been in that situation, they can't see any rhyme or reason to any of the things that are happening. But when you actually look at somebody and you think, what is the unmet need here? Why are they doing this? Because there's got to be a reason. It doesn't have to be a good reason. It doesn't have to be a reason that justifies it, but there's got to be something that's making them behave in that
And
way.
people think, like, for example,
Mm,
like when I say, like, people like that
mm,
I do this thing where I could be in silence or whatever
mm.
because I'm so understimulated and I need that
Yeah,
stimulation that I don't have.
yeah,
I might start screaming suddenly. I don't notice myself doing it in the moment. I might scream and then stop again and then continue back as normal.
yeah,
And it's like, and I'm like, it's not. But let's just say I lived with another person with autism
yeah,
and it hurts their ears. I'd be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, like,
yeah,
hurt you. It's because, I'm understimulated and my autism, you
yeah,
know, but doesn't mean what I did, it's not saying that what I did was wrong. Like
Yeah.
you're taking into consideration the other factors.
Yeah,
Like,
and again, and it doesn't mean that things like sometimes an autistic person will do things and they might do things that are harmful to other people, and it doesn't mean that behavior is okay for whatever reason, but
it's an
actually it's about, okay,
explanation.
so but you have to think, okay, why has that happened? What are the other ways that we can handle this situation that don't create that impact on other people,
Yeah.
and how can we work with them? And that can't just be, oh, well, I find it inconvenient. It's like, no, if someone's just like, oh, well, you're just being autistic in my presence and that stresses me, then that's not good enough reason. But if there's actually a genuine reason why it's affecting somebody, like, so for example, and this is one of the things that you pretty much just touched on, incompatible needs. Incompatible support needs. They assume all autistic people are the same, but actually we can aggravate each other. Some autistic people need peace and quiet all the time. They get overstimulated by any noise. Some can't handle any. Some need to make noise, otherwise they can't cope because they feel unstimulated. It's people can have incongruent needs and incongruent support needs, and putting those two people in the same place and treating them the same isn't going to help. And they're going to irritate each other and they're going to wind each other up. That doesn't mean that either of them are wrong. That doesn't mean that either of them are doing anything unacceptable. They're just existing in that way. And sometimes that's incongruent. That's fine. Just maybe don't put them in the same room as like, and ask them to be in each other's space all the time. Allow them to have space to self-soothe. For example, in the example that you gave of, that you sometimes need to scream to get some energy out and to stimulate yourself. So it's okay. And there might be theoretically somebody else who can't cope with noise. Is there other things that you can do to support to get your energy out and stimulate yourself? Are you allowed to listen to music, for example? What other things do you have there to stimulate yourself? And for that person, do they have access to ear defenders? Do they have access to things that create the quiet space that they need? It's about making sure but everyone's supported in a way that works for them, and that's not blanket. One of the things that you've touched that I think certainly really hits close to home for me, especially with a lot of the recent stuff around my sister's inquest, is around the idea of every behavior being pathologized. Once you have a mental health need, once you have anything on your records, everything that you do is it's a behavior. It's pathologized as something. The lawyer who was involved with our inquest, she gave the example that like she's seen things like, so she's seen it like written on like a parent's record that like their child went out without a raincoat, and that was a reason for child protection, right? And then she kind of thought, well, I've done that and I've not gotten any trouble for any of these other sorts of things. That would and but when you're under the microscope, anything that you do is treated like that. And it's one of the things that it's a really difficult incongruence, because as somebody who grew up in the care system and who is a survivor of abuse, I really, really understand that children aren't protected when they need to be. Like I truly, I'm a living proof. And at the same time, the stuff that I experienced with my sister as an autistic person trying to exist in the world and trying to and trying to have a baby. She didn't mean to have a baby. She got a little surprise cryptic pregnancy, but when she had that situation, she dealt with it and she did everything that she could to be a good mother. And the amount of stigma and bullying and the treatment that she got was just horrific. And we've sat through a 3 week long inquest and learned about all of that and learned that she was desperately failed and learned this is a problem within the family court systems and within children's services as a whole. And it's one of the things that I'm just learning about how I can speak about it, because it's one of these things that, like, if you've not been through it, you'd think it's the same. You'd think it's like a conspiracy theory. And sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes we were sitting there like thinking after the inquest, thinking about, what is it? Was this a conspiracy or was it incompetence? Like, and that's around adoption, all these other sorts of things. And that's something that is not necessarily like if I go into care experience spaces, that's not always a safe thing to talk about. To say actually lots of people aren't always taken away when they need that people are being taken away when they don't need to be taken away, and simultaneously that people aren't being taken away from unsafe homes when they need to be taken away. When I went into care, I chose to go into care. I said, I'm not safe. I'm getting beaten up. I need to go. But they didn't take me. I told them what was happening, and they just kind of went, well,
It happens.
well. I was like, causing me hurt. It's really fucking my brain up, and I'm worried I might die. You know. And yet simultaneously, and that experience that I had where no one listened to me and that I had to physically run away in like I had to walk like 6 miles in leather shoes and no socks on to get away from there with nothing except the clothes on my back, then go to my girlfriend at the time's house and then place everything, and like that was difficult. The only reason that happened was because my mother agreed to a Section 20 and she didn't live with me, so so she was able to, she wasn't the dangerous parent, she was looking after my sister and all these other sorts of things, and like how difficult it was to get into care. Like I didn't just go, I'm being abused, and they went, that's fine, let us take you and help you, child. It was just like, well, let's just see what happens. And then simultaneously, when my sister wasn't, she hadn't done anything, and she did everything they asked of her, and that was enough for like care proceedings. And it's like it's just irreconcilable. You kind of look at it and you go, how can those two things exist within the same system? How can it be so hard to get into care when you need it? How can I know so many people who've been abused by family and haven't been protected by social services, and then simultaneously watch what happened with my sister happen, where where they intervened and were involved with no good reasons. It's a really difficult one. I'm sorry if this is a little bit triggering for you. It's a bit of a rant that I'm on recently.
No,
It's a
it's
lot.
okay.
But it's this kind of whole thing where it's like, how do you explain that those two experiences exist within the same system, and how do you stop them from contradicting each other? One of the
Yeah.
really difficult things that happens within, and I had to explain it to, like, it was around my sister's inquest. I think it was someone I know's hairdresser, saying, like, we've had these things happen, like they're really awful and blah, 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 blah. And they were like, let's start like a coalition, let's fight against social services. And I was like, the thing is that what any action that we take around, saying that social services are taking children away unnecessarily also plays into the hands of people who are actually abusive to their children. Because they're going to sit in that same space and go, yes, my child was taken away and they didn't need to be. And none of us can see their case files. We've got no way of knowing who actually happened, who's actually telling the truth, and who's not telling the truth, who it didn't happen to, and who children actually did need to be taken away, because we don't know the situation. And it's that kind of, every both ways it can hurt people.
Mm.
It's so difficult because there's no clear solution. Everything that you do to say, actually, people are being separated unnecessarily, this is happening when it shouldn't be, also plays into the hands of abusers. And it's like, how do you reconcile? How do you balance that? How are you feeling, Crispy? You okay?
Yeah, fine. That's just my processing phase, I think.
That's okay. If you need any time to process, and I'm aware I'm going on my little rant about something because it's
No.
I'm not sure how much you know about it, but it only happened in May, so it's like it's still quite fresh. Yeah, did
Oh
it?
my
Did it?
God.
No, no, actually, no, it happened in April, and it ended just before May, so it's quite recent.
Yeah, it must be like a lot for you to
Oh,
process
yeah.
because I feel
Inquests,
like,
inquests suck.
yeah,
It massively suck. I'm not sure if you've ever had the unfortunate experience of having to go through one, but they really, really suck.
yeah, I can't imagine, but like, it must be awful,
Yeah.
And in that moment, like, I feel like even when you're going through that, you might not even process any of it
Oh yeah,
until like afterwards. It must be just so
massively.
much emotionally.
Oh yeah, I'm still hugely processing. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about so much of it. And it's 4 years since she died, so this isn't like a new, it's not like a new experience. But the thing is with inquests is they kind of put everything on hold. You don't really have any room to think or feel anything because you're too busy writing long witness statements or reading all the reports. We had two massive post boxes full of records that we had to read through. And obviously, and we were lucky enough to have a legal team. Many families going through inquests don't have that. And again, one of the extra complexities was that families are treated as a whole in an inquest. You're not allowed to have like a separate person. So my abuser was in that courtroom with me. Someone I hadn't seen in 9 years.
Wow.
So I had to do that and sit through a 3 week long inquest. So it's a really, really difficult process for me, and I'm still massively processing it. But I think it's that kind of, it's just another space that doesn't it's something within a lot of spaces, like family bits difficult because, and as I'm sure you get, family's complicated. I can
Tell me
still
about it.
have an obligation to go and sit through my sister's inquest, and yet simultaneously and have no choice but to sit civilly in a room with a man who tried to kill me, and there's no kind of accommodation within these processes. There's no, and it's that kind of, and if I talk about this, it's going to discredit our case, even though the reason why this happened was nothing to do with him because she didn't really have contact with him. Um, it's still like this kind of massive complexity that trying to unpick any of those sorts of situations, and I guess kind of study it because I'm aware I'm going slightly off piste, gently moving into kind of complex trauma and thinking about how you kind of have to explain what's happened to you and explain what you've been through. And it's like trying to explain this where this like tangle, like that tangle of like cables that you have somewhere in your house, right? Which is like, all of the like charging cables and all the things you might ever need. And it's like so tangled up that to try and get it out, it takes hours to pick through it and get it out. That's kind of what I feel like explaining complex trauma is like, you have to unpick it to the point where it's like digestible. And this might be an experience you share, but like when people ask you like casual questions about, oh, like what's your family look like? And you're like, I'm
Why
like,
you got the
wow.
same face?
Yeah, it's like, it's so I kind of thought, well, I've got this one. Well, this one's dead, and I was in care the whole time, so I don't live with them. And it's like you have to like, I think I just got to start drip feed the trauma when you meet a new person, because it's not even like, and like it's not even trauma dumping. It's just like basic facts about your life that you
Hmm.
have to try and explain, and it's just like gently you have to give them just a little bit, just like this. My sister's dead. Grew up in care. Child abuse, autism. You have to like gently plonk them in a way that they're able to digest.
Hmm.
And then when you kind of have that new start, and then the inquest is a whole new one. Like that, I've had like stuff before that was complex. This was like beyond complex because even I don't even get it. I don't even know what happened. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I was there the whole time. Um, and trying to pick through that kind of experience, and picking through all these other sorts of things, it gets extremely complicated. And I'm sure that might be an experience that you share, where it's that kind of understanding and moving through complex trauma is not only about one of the things that I kind of use to differentiate between trauma, and there's a discussion that's been going on kind of within the last couple of years, which I'm sure you've seen as well, where kind of the term trauma has been quite generalized.
Oh my God. It's not traumatic that you lost your pencil case. Grow up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that kind of, and it's that understanding of things that are subjectively traumatic and that are objectively traumatic. There are things that you can experience as traumatic within yourself, because of the experience, because of complexities and experiences from that. And there's things that are kind of no matter who it happens to, it sucks, and they're all good. Everyone's going to struggle with that. Things like, death and, like abuse and things like that. It's for me, I class like something as like big trauma. When it's like, like when you have to when you explain it to someone and they get upset too.
Hmm.
Yeah. I feel like that's what draws the line between a lot of kind of things that are, things that are like sad and upsetting and adversity, unlike and the things that you tell something they don't know what to do. They don't know how to respond, and it's almost like things like for like things like traumatic deaths like suicide and murder affect communities. It's outside of just you. Things like some and things like your parent dying, affects everything. It affects your chances at things. It is things that will come up in standard conversation. And these are the things that when you tell it's a lot of, I think the differentiation with a lot of big T, like big traumatic stuff is when you tell someone about it and it upsets them, it distresses them, it makes them feel, or at the very least, it makes them feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that it is important to differentiate within that, and it's not that no other experience can be experienced as traumatic, it's not a competition, but it means that you're silenced again, you know? Not only do you have to deal with the experience of what happened to you, but you have to then deal with everyone else's emotions
Mhm.
when you ever, where if you ever talk about it.
Yeah. I feel like
And
there's so and the thing is, then there's this other side where, you're telling me about an inquest and stuff
Mm.
like that, whereas like a average person might be like, are
Yeah,
you okay? And then I'm just like there, like being like, okay, okay, and I guess not either we're cut off so much or
yeah.
we're just used to it.
I think it's probably a little bit of a mix of both. Like I'll hear things that like there are still things that sometimes get me. I was on the train the other day and I went past a building. I was like, oh, it's a really interesting building, and it was a children's hospice, and that affected me for a little while. I was like, I remember that children's hospices existed and got depressed on the train for about 20 minutes. That happens, but even that, like that's something I was like, oh, that's new to me. Like that's trauma that I've not been through. Like, touch wood, never will. Please, please. That's what I don't need. Um, but you get so I think you get desensitized. You know, you get used to people's everyday life being just horrific things. And that's the experience. And especially when your everyday life has been horrific things, even if it's not anymore. I mean, it's even worse when it still is, but you're like, yeah, dead people. And
It's like
it
it's
takes,
like I can't like and it's like and like and it's like and then the worst thing is
mm,
especially when it's like a neurotypical person and a neurodivergent person
yeah.
and they expect you to be like, are you okay? Da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I'm
And then you
like,
just let
but
go.
that doesn't come
Mhm.
to my head.
Yeah.
Like when I want to go see someone about
Yeah.
something, let's just say I'm in an office.
Yeah.
For example, when I have to conduct interviews
Yeah.
when I'm hiring,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
to write down on the page, hello, how are you? Like a script. Because
Yeah.
I would just be like, okay, you're here for this. Great. Can you command the role? Great. Let's get
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, I love social scripting. I find it so useful for everything. One of the real revelations to me as an autistic person was when I started to value small talk. Took a while, right? Controversial one as an autistic people, I like small talk. But when I started to see it as something that did hold a purpose, my issue was before I was like, well, we're not communicating any information. So what's the point of doing this? Hello, how are you? Nice to see you. And and the position that I've got to now is I understand that that's something, that's people's way of testing the water to see if you're like a person that's like vaguely sane to talk to, and that you're going to follow basic social rules, right? It's like it's like they're it's like they're testing a little bit to see if you're like a person who they can have a conversation with or not. It's almost like that. It's almost like playing to some degree. Like when it's that first introduction, it's going, are you somebody who follows the basic social rules? Are you somebody that I'm able to have a conversation with?
Yeah.
And if somebody subverts those social rules, they get outed. They don't get treated in the same way. People will treat them like a weirdo, and other people will see them like a weirdo. It's that kind of and that's what they're doing. They're establishing the kind of tone of the conversation. They're establishing how someone feels about them. They're establishing who this person is and whether they follow social rules. And then when it comes to people that it's building connection. You know, it's saying hello to somebody, like saying hello to your neighbor whenever you pass them. Seems stupid to me, on like a basic level. I'm like, why would I do that? I'm going somewhere, I'm busy. But when I kind of started to realize to myself that actually these 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 interactions do hold purpose, they hold social capital, they do matter, and it makes my life, and it builds connection, it builds happiness. But that took me a while to get to. And
I have a
I still
question.
have to script. I have to remember to do it. I'll be like, right, okay, hello person. Let's start talking about complex trauma. As a kind of fun today.
I feel more
You know,
comfortable
yeah.
talking about complex trauma than the
Yeah.
weather.
Oh, I get that. No, I'm with you. Like, at least I know how to have a conversation. And
Mm.
to me, it's a meaningful conversation. It's a deep conversation. It's one that brings value to my life. And hello, how are you? And what's the weather like? Is something that I don't intrinsically see as bringing value. And it's not as comfortable because it feels awkward. I'm like, so what's the right thing to say? How like I'm not allowed to info dump on you about like hurricanes. Is that not allowed as part of the like weather conversation? You know?
Or they're like, oh my God, it's sunny. Isn't that great? We've been like we needed this. And I'm like, I hate like in my head, I'm like, I don't like the sun. I hate the sun. I want nothing to do with the sun.
Yeah, no, I hear that. You're not like exactly. You're allowed to talk about the weather, but you're not allowed to express strong opinions on the weather, apparently.
Mm.
right?
But
Like
we're all supposed to be happy
when
about the
I
sun.
start saying that I hate the rain and that it stinks, or when I start saying I love the rain, I'll say, you know what I like to do, like when it's raining, I like to go and stand outside in the rain, just feel it. I'm just gonna have a little notebook moment. Then people look at you like you're weird, and you're like, I thought we were talking about the weather. This isn't a safe space anymore. You know, this ain't a
You're the
safe.
one that brought it up.
You
Like
brought up the weather. We don't. Now we can't talk about the weather anymore. It's so funny.
this
Social
relationship's
rules are
always
so
about you.
complicated, Smith. I don't under I like even after what 23 years of moving through the world and learning to interact with people, still the amount of times where I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
I just don't get it. I'm like, why we're allowed
I
to
have a
talk about
question.
weather until I'm info dumping about how weather storms are named.
I want to talk about weather storms.
Yeah,
If
they're
you
so
want to talk
cool.
about weather storms, call me, text me. I'd be like, it's better than talk about, oh my God, it's sunny. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not blind. I don't have any visual, maybe a little bit, but I don't have any like
You've not got
major
so many that you
visual
can't tell it's sunny. Yeah.
impairment. I can tell. I can see that it's sunny. It
Yeah.
hurts my eyes. Great, I can recognize it. What do you want me to do about it? Do you want me to be like, oh my God, hello, sun? Like, so can we book you for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? Yeah.
Please, actually, can I book it? I agree with that. Can we start doing that? I was like, can we just have a little bit of weather? In fairness, I do like the weather, and it's quite a fun thing to talk about. I like talking about weather, but when I want to talk about the weather, I'm like, let's talk about like tropical storms and like let's talk about climate change. No one wants to talk about climate change anymore, huh? Let's go talk about let's talk about the weather. Oh, it's getting so warm. Oh, well, climate change. No, that apparently that's controversial. Not allowed to talk about
And I'm like, mm, and it's like, and I'm just like,
that. Mm.
and it's like, there's like social cues within social cues within social cues within social cues.
Oh,
And I'm
so
like,
complicated.
write a book, like a mini book where I can take it, like, those like mini Bibles or mini like dictionaries?
Yeah.
One of those, like
Okay.
size things. And I'd be like, okay, wait a minute. Before we have this conversation, let me just quickly check my notes
Yeah.
and I'll come back to you.
Weather.
Yeah.
How to talk about this. But the thing is it's so context dependent, it's so complicated. And like I feel like I'm just constantly learning through trial and error, you
We
know?
both
Like,
have complex trauma,
yeah.
but we find them more complicated
Oh yeah, that's fine. I can talk about complex trauma, you know. People want to talk about
any day.
like if people want to talk about suicide, I'm like, let's go. It's a great conversation. I love this conversation.
Like I would
People like
rather
let's talk about like, you know, like let's have like a casual interaction at like a party. I'll be like, I don't know how to do this. There's a thing that I also do where like, and I was talking, you know, I was talking back to this woman I met on the train, because like this other autistic person that I just randomly met. You know what we were talking about? We were talking about neurodivergence. We were talking about how we go into different modes, right? I have like travel mode of going somewhere. All I'm thinking about is like, I am going somewhere. I'm going on this train. Here's the train I need to catch. My partner, right, walked straight past him. Didn't realize he was there. Been with him for a couple of years at that point. Didn't even realize he was there because I was in like, oh, but I'm traveling somewhere. And then he waved his hand in front of me, and I stopped, and I was like, and I was just
who
thinking,
is this?
who's this arsehole waving his hand in front of my face? What a dick! Stopped. Took me a good couple of seconds. Oh, yes. Didn't even recognize him because I was going somewhere, you know? Like I was traveling and like I think my brain goes into like different modes. So like if I'm like socializing, I can be like, okay, mask on, right? I'm gonna do the socializing now. We're gonna talk to each other and I will follow
Our
the social mode.
wardrobe full of
If it
masks.
happens like yeah, oh yeah. But you know, like if it happens unexpectedly, um, and you're like, oh or you see someone somewhere you're not expecting to see them, I'm like,
Yeah, I don't want to see you. I'll be like, oh yeah. And it's the thing is like, one other
mm,
thing that I noticed is like you can't say
mm.
that people are old.
No,
They're
no,
like
you're not allowed to
not
make any comments
old.
on people.
They're like grey hair. Okay,
Yeah.
I know people who are 18 who can have grey hair, but then I'm like, they're over 25. The support ends after you're 25. Like,
Yeah.
they
No,
go
I hear
like
you.
a whole.
Yeah, there are things you're allowed to remark on about people and things you're not. And yet, how many people comment on my walking stick? And that's fine, apparently.
My
Autistic
God,
people don't do that to me. Like, if an autistic person, like, you know, actually, like, genuinely,
you
like, the
have a
amount of people,
visual.
like, who may, like, comments on, like, my walking stick or my mobility aids. And that's fine, apparently, but I can't call someone old.
I have a question. Do you like decorate it?
I don't decorate them, but they have like really cool colors. One second, I'll get one and I'll show you. I'm loving the little absence dance while I went off and got it. I appreciate that. This is one of my walking sticks.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah. So
Oh
it's got like glitter all inside. And hold on, it gets better, right?
oh my God.
It lights up.
I don't need a cane, but I
Yeah.
might just get one.
I might just get one, I know, right? People say that, honestly, and I get it. Like, it is really cool. It's
Like
one of the
me,
like
people call me magpies because I'm
yeah,
like, oh, shiny.
shiny, yeah, shiny thing. I love it. I have about 9 different colors.
Oh my God, that's
No,
yeah.
I love it. It's actually one of my proudest. Like, some people collect like walking sticks. Some people collect handbags. Some people collect shoes. I collect walking sticks, and I love them. They're great because I need it everywhere I go. But you know what? It's one of those really great things about having a walking stick like that is that people stop asking you questions about what's wrong with you, and they start asking, "Where did you get your walking stick?" It's really cool. It's great. People stop asking me like, "Do you need that?" Because, but like, but you'd be surprised. Like, it's only really like men. No offense to men who ask me the question oh one of the things that always really annoys me is when people ask me like, oh, like, did you get into like an accident or something? Like, do you think I would get this if I got into an accident? How much do you think this costs? It's not this ain't NHS spec, babe. You don't get this for free when you get into a little when you break your ankle playing football. But I've had people go, oh, like, have you like had an accident? Like, did you play
Is it
play
any of your
sport?
business?
And I'm like, well, also it's there was this one time, right? I was at the train station. And I was literally, this is one of the staff, right? I was walking home from work, I think. I'd had a long ass day, and this man, right, at the train, like he was like watching like the gate. He stopped me and said, "Excuse me," and I went, "It's like." Like your like disability thing, and I was like is that like why have you got that? It's like, oh, I was like, because I'm disabled. He's like, oh, is it gonna get better? Why do you ask that question to a random person? You know what? A big part of me just wanted to go, no, I'm actually going to die in 4 weeks.
Oh, I love that.
No, it's going to kill me. What does what just
Like, I
and
just
it's
said,
like people just think that's an acceptable question to ask.
be like, yeah, what's wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
and they're like, what's wrong with you?
It's like they
For
don't realize that
example,
like that could be like a massively traumatic thing. For me, it's like, oh, my body's just built like this. I'm just disabled. My collagen don't work. But like the amount of people whose story of becoming disabled is like seriously traumatic. Like, oh, I got on a car crash and I lost my and my leg got paralyzed, or I had like a brain injury, or all these other like, or there's loads of really horrible ways you can become
mhm,
disabled. It's not one of the things that I do like to remind people though is that disability is the only minority that somebody can make you part of. So watch out. Bonker,
I thought of it that way.
it is, that and most people will experience disability at some point in their
Yeah.
lives, even if that's temporary, even if
Mm.
that's they broken their leg, or even that if you live long enough to get old, you're going to experience a lot of that. Come it and it's insane to me that people are so blasé about it when it's like, one minority that you literally like you can become a part of at any moment. It takes 5 seconds. Yeah.
It's so
It's
like
one stray ball hitting you in the head. There you go. That's not
people
a threat, I
like
promise.
think I'm like so like such a brat.
Mm,
I've been called that exact words because I get people to carry my shopping baskets or bags or my shopping for me, and
yeah.
I'm like, I physically can't hold even a 1.5 liter bottle or water for
Yeah.
more than 5 seconds.
Yeah. I know it's something that I always feel a bit weird about, because when I go like, so I'll get sometimes support from my carers to like get to like go to the shop and stuff like that, just because I can carry like a small amount of things, but I can't carry heavy stuff. It will throw my shoulders out, will hurt. It's just not worth it. And one of the things that like it especially gets complicated like as like a white woman asking a person of color to carry my shopping for me. I'm like, this does not feel right. I feel like this really throws up some dynamics that I'm not comfortable with. A close friend of mine. She's a wheelchair user, and her full-time carer is a woman of color, and she's got weird responses from people about it before because it's a weird dynamic. it feels uncomfortable as the person receiving it, and I can imagine it might feel uncomfortable as the person delivering it as well. But genuinely, people react to it in all sorts of weird ways. But it's that kind of needing to ask people for stuff, and it can come off, if somebody does, well, it's one of the good things, to be honest, about having a walking stick, because it's that kind of physical represent that it's that physical sign that you do have disability. Some family lanyards have lost their meaning. They used to do that, but now most people see them as like, oh, I don't need to wear a mask thing, if you rather than seeing it as like a sign of somebody having a disability, really. So it gets very strange. It's so difficult, I hope that because of that, it gives me slightly more leeway to, look less like I'm just being an arsehole by asking people to carry things. But it's complicated, and people do think that you're being an arsehole for it, even
Yeah.
if you explain. They won't. Sometimes they just don't get it. You know what I mean? It's difficult.
Yeah. And you want to be like, "Oh, shake them."
Please let me have this,
Oh,
especially if it's
you know
something that you
what?
need.
This is such a lovely conversation that we're having.
Nice and cheerful.
You know
Suicide.
what? I have a question.
Please do.
I have a question.
Please do.
How old were you when you realized not everybody feels suicidal?
I don't know. To be honest, my experiences with suicidality are quite complicated because I grew up witnessing it.
Mm.
So for me, my experiences with suicidality actually aren't that significant. I have been suicidal, but for me, I've always experienced it as more of like intrusive thoughts
Mm.
rather than
Oh.
as kind of base desire. And for me, that's because I witnessed suicidality and witnessed suicidal behavior about 9 for the first time. And when that first happened, that was blamed on me. I was told it was my fault. So it really screwed my brain up. And so my kind of relationship with suicide is a really, really complicated one, because it's that kind of, there's that fear of, if I do it, I'm doing it in a way that's like other people. But it's that kind of, I've had for a long time that kind of undercurrent of, well,
Yeah.
and there's levels of suicidality as well, isn't there? There's that kind of, it starts. There's a chart somewhere. I've got a link. I've got a post on my LinkedIn, which is right. You messaged me, I think. So I think it's that Ermengarde's suicide scale. It talks about like the different levels of suicidality, and that there's so many steps before I'm going to kill myself right now.
Mm.
I've only properly attempted once, but there's been lots of little kind of backs and forths about it. But that's because, again, of that complexity of intrusive thoughts and dissociation and all these other sorts of things that come into it. I guess my answer to that would be the, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it. I think it took me until about my late teens to realize that most people weren't familiar with suicide,
Mm.
you know? Um, And that was only really when I went into the adult world. And still, to be honest, most people that I speak to have some understanding, some experience, even if that. And, I think it's become very casually spoken about now in a
Mm.
way that it wasn't before. And then
Like
so,
it's like the word trauma.
yeah, it's
It's like, oh
become
my
very,
God, I'm gonna kill myself. I'm gonna like, and there's a difference between when it's like people are actually contemplating it,
yeah,
or they
this
are going
experience.
to do
Yeah,
it
yeah.
instead of being like, oh my God, like I lost my pencil case, I'm gonna kill myself. Like, actually, it
Yeah.
depends if they're actually going like or actually feel because I could
Yeah.
lose a
Like, is
pencil
it
case.
that deep though? Like, are you actually going to kill yourself because you lost your men's case? And you're not, realistically.
Like,
So,
probably.
some people might. Well, there'll be other reasons behind it though. It's not the only reson why, I
Yeah.
presume. There's
Oh my God.
context.
We
Um,
have to conclude the podcast. I can't believe we have to do that all.
honestly, I get it. But I think it's that kind of, it has become, there's a lot of things that have become, I think the word I'm looking for is trivialized,
Mm.
where it is a joke now. And I think that's something that's come quite naturally with the fact that awareness has been raised. And there's still this kind of, I get quite irritated when people talk about mental health awareness, because yeah, people are aware of mental health. Yeah. When that's like, but only when that's like low level, like I don't want to say entry level mental health, right? Or entry level mental illness, but it's like, like 6 sessions of CBT, it's mental illness where someone's still productive to the world. Yeah,
Mm.
it's allowed as long as you can still serve a capitalistic system. Not to be too controversial, but you're
It
allowed
is
your
what
mental.
it is.
But it's about kind of people are okay with mental health when it's someone feeling a bit sad.
Yeah.
Psychosis, people aren't there, you know.
Yeah.
Or severe mental illness of any kind. One second. So I'm just being asked a question. Sorry, my carers are here doing a little bit of stuff. So and that's a weird thing. Again, like even in work, sometimes when I have like carers here, sometimes I like explain to people I'm on a call and I'm having to like direct people to what needs doing and things like that. It's always a bit of a weird one, but there's a better understanding with mental health now. There's a better understanding that, but it's kind of still like that. It's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And I do understand it. There are some people for whom those discussions need to happen. You know,
Yeah.
there are especially people who are older, men, people from cultural backgrounds where that isn't okay, where it's not okay to show weakness or show vulnerability.
Yeah.
Those discussions are important, but
Mm.
they do go a bit further than that. It's that kind of understanding of actually, okay, so you're fine with somebody being sad until they can't move, until they can't feed themselves now, and they've got yeah, and they've got mats in their hair. That then that's not okay to talk about, you know, or oh, it's okay for people to be suicidal as long as it's like 13 reasons why.
Yeah.
Not when it's talking about somebody who's, who's attempted multiple times and somebody who's got self-harm scars all over their arms. You know, there's like levels of
I
acceptance
ch-
that people are at.
yeah, people like like people ask me, "Oh, would you ever get like because I have tattoos, right, on my body, or even before I got tattoos, people are
Mm.
like, "Oh, would you cover them up when you get older, or would you cover them up?" And I'm like, "No."
Even though you chop your arm off.
I'm like,
But also
"No."
you shouldn't have
It's
to.
like it's like telling a lion, like not lion, like telling a leopard to get rid of its spots,
Yeah.
or a tiger to get rid of its stripes.
Yeah.
Unless it's the tiger.
No,
But
I
I'm
don't
like,
know.
you won't. Like, it's who I am, and I'm proud of it. And if people who have self-harm scars want to cover it up, no, I'm not opposed to it. It's their
Yeah.
body; they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Mm.
But
But
it's
that's
just
their
like,
choice. And it's again, it's going back to why is that person asking a question? Is that for their comfort or for yours? It's not about you. If someone wants you to cover something up, that's for their comfort.
yeah,
That's not it would be different if you'd expressed insecurity and someone said, well, if you wanted to, you could get tattoos. That's them helping you. Somebody making that suggestion unsolicited, it's about
yeah,
their comfort, and it's a real thing. It's, people are okay with people being ill or people being disabled or anything until it starts becoming an inconvenience or it starts making them feel uncomfortable. That's the moment where it's not acceptable anymore. Like you're allowed to talk about sadness, you're allowed to talk about depression, you're allowed to talk about anxiety until it affects them. And that's a line for a lot of people, I think. And it's not that I don't understand it to any level. I think I can understand that,
yeah,
I can understand people, feeling uncomfortable. But
yeah,
that's sometimes there's actually not something, there's nothing that you're doing as a person. That's not you directly,
yeah,
generally. That's a general you. I promise I'm not attacking you directly.
yeah,
Like for example, self-harm scars, there's nothing that you have done to make that person feel uncomfortable. They feel uncomfortable, if they want to say, oh, we need to cover it up, that's nothing that you've done to make them feel that way. You've not gone into detail like, well, I got this one on this night. And it's, things like that. If it's just existing in the world and you're moving around if you're moving around as a person who has scars, you're not doing anything to make that person feel uncomfortable apart from existing in your own right and existing in the body that you have. And if they feel uncomfortable, that's for them to deconstruct, is my opinion. But again,
definitely.
people aren't quite there. It's again, if someone's experiencing if somebody, is experiencing psychosis and that makes somebody uncomfortable, obviously that person should have access to the support that they need, especially if they're like horribly psychotic. But if somebody is acting differently in public, that's not the end, that doesn't mean, you need to call the police on them immediately. For example, that's a big one. If somebody is behaving unusually, that doesn't mean it's necessarily a reason to call the police. It doesn't mean it's a reason to attack them or to physically stop them. it's about actually that kind of how do you know, and if you it's difficult because with like mental illness acceptance, like not every state of illness needs to be accepted, you know. You should be supporting somebody to access the help that they need. But simultaneously, you need to accept where somebody is and where they're at. And there is still not the level of acceptance and the level of support or the level of awareness for severe mental illness. And that's something that I think needs to happen. You know, complex trauma, you know, people are fine talking about trauma when it's not like everything that's happened to you all the time. You know, like, oh, it's like people are fine talking about PTSD when it's a soldier in war,
Yeah.
when it's sexual abuse, you know. And it's not that, again, it's not that those discussions that are more socially acceptable aren't valid discussions, not they're not important, because they are massively important, but we don't have to stop there, is my opinion.
So, looking back on our conversation,
Mm.
what's the most important takeaway or message you want our audience to remember?
Such a difficult question. Um, I think the message that I like people to remember most is to always see the person at the center of everything that you do. It's very easy to pathologize. It's very easy to get lost in the nuances of, you know, somebody's diagnosis or somebody's experience. But actually, I believe that the route to healing and recovery for any person is being held and known for who they
Mm.
are and being treated in a way that's with respect for them as a human, being treated as a human being and being
Mm.
treated holistically, not just for a diagnosis that they have, but actually what are their hopes, their dreams, their wishes, who is it they want to be, and how are you as how is anyone as a professional or anyone in any sort of setting thinking about the person, their experience behind behavior,
Mm.
behind diagnosis, who are they? And how can you treat them with compassion and understanding? And I think there's something that they talk about in kind of maybe they either talk about it in peer support or I just made it up at some point, one or two. But I always say kind of heart to heart connection.
Mm.
And maybe that's because I'm spiritual and I believe that, you know, you could, but I think it's actually connection. And I think it's the route to healing for a lot of people, especially people with complex trauma who have not had safe connections I think everyone in their small part of the world has a way to connect with people and to show love. There's a book called What Do We Owe to Each Other? And I do believe that we owe each other connection, we owe each other kindness. That's not to every person, and that's not without any boundaries. But I think for any professionals, it's extremely key to just actually connect with somebody as a human being, heart to heart, soul to soul, eye to eye. And even if somebody's not a mental health professional, actually, how can they connect to the people that are important to them? If they have anyone they're responsible for, or anybody that they work with, especially anyone who really pisses them off, how can
Yeah.
they build connection in a way that is healthy and respectful and brings positivity and kindness to everybody involved in that equation? Connection and kindness, I think, is the root to a lot of things. The world would be a lot better if we had that. That's my long
Definitely.
message.
Where can our listeners find you or connect with you to stay updated on your work?
LinkedIn's probably my big place for work stuff. I have a TikTok, but I probably won't recommend that too openly on my one of things because it's more I'm a bit more like it's the sort of thing that my professional stuff comes in, but I mostly just post videos of my cat. So if people want to stay updated on my cat, that's an option. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably my best place. I can also be found on X, which is what used to be Twitter and that I still think is Twitter now. Um, so I can post the link, I can give you the links to that, and you can pop them wherever. I don't know them, I don't know all of them off the top of my head, so I'd have to give them to you to click.
And finally, what's one thing that you're grateful for today?
Do I have to pick one? I've got so many things I'm grateful for.
Oh, okay, I'll let you have like three.
Okay. I'm grateful that I'm safe. I'm grateful and a part of that, I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. I'm grateful that I have a job that allows me to bring my light into the world and allows me to make change. That's something that many people don't have the privilege of having. And I'm grateful for my cat because she's really cute. I'm just grateful for her all the time. She brings me joy.
Amazing. Oh my God. Thank you for like filming the first part of this podcast.
Of
Like,
course. I hope you found it question mark helpful. I feel like we've just had a really good conversation rather than actually talking about everything so productive. But I think there's value in that too.
yeah.
Not everything has to be super structured. I'm a bit of a yapper. I keep going. So
As we draw this captivating episode to a close, we hope you found inspiration and enlightenment in our discussions with Rowan Foster. Remember, the journey towards better mental health care is ongoing, but with voices like Rowan's leading the charge, positive change is within reach. We encourage you to carry the insights gained today forward, whether it is challenging misconceptions, advocating for inclusive services, or simply being a supportive ally to those navigating their mental health journey. Together, we can break down barriers, foster understanding, and create a future where everyone has access to compassionate and supportive mental health care. Thank you for joining us on this important conversation and stay iconic until next time.